Let's pause that. Pardon my French. Jeez, I apologize. Today I want to share with you some cultural differences between cussing in French and cussing in English. The video is going to be in English just to explain the cultural differences, and no, I'm not going to give you any cuss words. I already have a video that shows that, but I do want to explain some of the cultural differences that you might have heard of or not. Hi, this is Rachele DeMeo from Belle Terre Academy. So if you've been to France or a French-speaking country, or perhaps you've watched movies or even listened to songs, you might have heard that there is a lot more cussing in French-speaking countries. And you might say, whoa, why? Well, let's just say culturally it's extremely different than cussing in the US or in even other English-speaking countries. One thing that's very important to know is the fact that it's not necessarily considered crass or technically a lack of education or any of that if you cuss. Even so, I would say I have very conservative parents, and my mom probably wouldn't even say like the word damn in English, and yet in French she would say a lot more. So that should give you an idea culturally a little bit how cussing is seen in France. It isn't something that we just use here. I get it now because I've lived in the States long enough to understand this, but it's really not seen the same way. So when you're learning a new cuss word, so to speak, don't look at it as the equivalent, because if you look at the dictionary and you look at the definition, it is so incredibly harsh for an English speaker that they're like, how could I ever say that? So it doesn't necessarily put you in a different social class or whatnot. I come from a very educated family, and yet in the appropriate context, we may cuss. That's the key that comes with cussing in French, is that it really depends on the context. Cussing isn't just like, you know, you stubbed your toe or you're mad at someone and the first thing that comes out. A lot of it is built on humor. So you might even cuss at someone, a friend, jokingly because you are like egging them on, or you're just trying to be humorous and you're just using certain words to do that. And it wouldn't be necessarily like an aggressive thing. And so how can you kind of know is based on the tone of voice, the facial expressions, you can see it in the eyes, you can see it in the smile or lack thereof, to know if a person is serious or not with cussing. And so when it comes to cussing, you can see if it's something that is like an aggressive, like, you know, somebody's getting in a fight on the street and they're cussing each other out and punching each other. Obviously that is used more literally, so to speak, but there is a lot of cussing that we use that is not considered bad at all. So that equivalent in English is not necessarily really the same equivalent in French, even if it might mean, like, you know, a certain word might mean the same in English and French when you look at it in the dictionary. It doesn't have the same weight. In English, it carries a very heavy weight, and so certain business meetings, at church, at whatever, you're going to be very, you know, proper, so to speak. But in France, it's not really like that. It's not to the extent that it is in the United States. When it comes to children, there is more of like, hey, watch your mouth when we hear kids cussing, because we kind of think like, oh, it's something that grown-ups do, so to speak, in a context. So like for me, I tell my kids like, you know, we do it in a certain context as adults, and it really depends on the context. That's all it depends on, but it's for grown-ups, so to speak. I don't like to say big people because it makes them feel like that's a good thing, but I definitely want them to be okay with it. And so they've heard cuss words and they've heard the equivalent, and they're like, they already know culturally that there's a difference. And one way that you can know that is that in France, more and more, they're adopting these English cuss words as part of their own vocabulary. Some of them are pretty harsh, like the F word, but if you listen to them in songs or you listen to them in the context, a lot of it is mostly in songs and in music, well, the French culture is not getting how harsh that is. They're still using the French culture when they're expressing it, so they're not like, oh, that's so terrible. They don't even care if a kid listens to it. Actually, culturally, to kind of put it in perspective for you, is that like in the States, you have a lot of songs that are in English that you'll mute, or they'll like bleep out the cuss word in the song for kids or on public radio. Whereas in France, when you're putting on the radio in France, you're hearing songs with cuss words. You're hearing public radio with cuss words. You're hearing like talk shows with a lot of cuss words, and your kids may be in the car. Same applies with TV. There's not that same rating with all these kind of cuss words. So I know it's really hard for Americans and English speakers to wrap their mind around that because of the way you're raised, because of possibly your education or your social class or whatever it is that kind of, you know, put you to think that way. And I get it completely. But I will say that culturally it's different. And so when you're using it, it does not have the same weight. It only has the same weight when a person's like constantly cussing. I mean, when a person, that's when I would say like, okay, you can tell the social class is a little different, or there's a lack of education, or whatever you want to call it. I don't like to employ certain words that could seem like mean, but the only time that you would really look at it the way an American may look at it or another English speaker may look at it is if a person, that's all they're doing is everything out of their mouth is just cuss word, cuss word, cuss word unnecessarily. However, if it's done in context, which is either serious because like you just stubbed your toe, or humorous because you're trying to egg a person on and you guys are kind of like goofing off at each other, then that makes the difference. And so just learn to accept that, adopt it, and you'll notice that really that weight is not that heavy. And so you're equivalent to French, to the F word in French that we use all the time, that your banker may use just as well as, you know, the person at the post office does not carry that same weight. And so I hope that helps you if you're trying to figure out some cultural differences. And some of you have asked me like, hey, some of you are American, then you're living in France now for work or whatnot, and you're asking me like, I don't know how this works, what? Like, this is strange to me, the doctor cussed or whatever it is, and yet they're like using the VOUS, they're very respectful. Well, now you kind of get it. The culturally, basically just does not have the same weight, and it is used in context. I hope that video has helped you enlighten some of this, you know, cultural differences that you're not used to. Just like I wasn't used to certain things, you know, when I moved to the States, and there's a lot of things culturally I had to learn. Well, I hope that helps you, whether you're traveling to France, whether you have French friends, whether you're just trying to master the French language and really speak like a native, or maybe you already live there. But anyway, this should hopefully put some light. Feel free to comment below on videos you'd like to see, even if it's just cultural. I did this one purposely in English because to really explain to English speakers about cussing and so forth in France. But if you have comments, or if you really want a video, then let me know and I'll be sure to do it for you. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Au revoir, les amis.